냐제 쳔보도 닝미장 돈은 뭐는 쳔보 냐게다 나그라다는 잔도 쳔모도 tumbato jejanla ki shomsar ne chen ro zer ni jan gam sa ja wor tu ji shan lo yalaman jime banzo ja la soran gon ge to ban bo ro shin ji lo gon ge to ban bo ro shin ji lo gon ge to ban bo ro shin ji lo.
Profound and subtle Dharma is rarely encountered in eons. Now we hear and follow it. May we realize the Tathagata's meaning. To liberate beings, please generate bodhicitta before teaching.
Listen to the Dharma with a mind-seeking knowledge. Next, we will begin expounding the Shurangama Sutra. In the Shurangama Sutra, a question was just asked earlier. At that time, Venerable Purna asked, if the four primary elements pervade the entire Dharma realm, then among these four elements, for instance, fire and water have different characteristics. How can they be perfectly interfused? This is one aspect. Also, among the four elements, whether we speak of the 4, 5, or 7 elements, because previously we have been analyzing the 7 elements. Among the 7 elements, there are also things like space, earth, and the great land. These also have completely different natures. How can they, within a single, all-pervading Dharma realm, be accommodated and mutually coexist? Why is it like this? This is the main question we are analyzing now. Actually, after studying the Shurangama Sutra, we usually feel that all myriad phenomena are of one taste and one entity within the Dharma realm. Or we might say that all myriad phenomena are of one taste and one entity within the true alaya. There are many such statements. But as for this statement, if you haven't studied the Shurangama Sutra, you might wonder if this refers to the conventional truth or the ultimate truth. In the ultimate truth, it's impossible for everything to be one taste and one entity as some existing thing. That is impossible if it's in the conventional truth, because of the characteristics of these conventional phenomena, including the fact that each nature of earth, water, fire, and wind is completely different. In that case, how could it be that they all merge into a single entity within one Dharma? We might even ask, for example, the alaya in my mind stream and the alaya in your mind stream and the alaya in Shakyamuni Buddha's mind stream, are these ultimately one entity or different entities, and so on. There are many doubts. But regarding these questions, I think this time, by studying the Shurangama Sutra, if we study it well, the Buddha has given us an exceptionally clear answer. Therefore, during the process of studying the Shurangama Sutra, everyone should have a somewhat special kind of enthusiasm or seeking mind for Mahayana Buddhism to study it with. This is very important. Otherwise, you will just be like, I have to listen on the surface, and you join in listening, but while listening, your mind is not focused on the Dharma meaning. Some people often do other things on the side. They just leave the radio playing on the side, and then they themselves on the side are either surfing the internet or looking at other things. If that's the case, it actually doesn't have much meaning. It would be better to just turn it off. Just turn it off. After turning it off, do whatever you need to do. That would be better. Otherwise, for a single person's mind to be engaged in two things at once is very difficult. So during the process of our listening, everyone must carry questions. It darkens when clouds gather. There is movement through it when the wind blows. After a rain, the sun reappears and the air is clear. A turbid mist arises when water condenses out of the air. In a dust storm, the air is obscured, and reflections appear in water that is clear and still. Here, he is speaking from the perspective of space, as just mentioned. Why does he say this? Purna, you should think about it. Our vast outer space, or empty space, the vast great empty space, is actually, first, it is stated here that various appearances can manifest within it. Within space, because it does not reject anything, although its essential attribute is not the appearance of various entities, various appearances can still manifest within space. How do various appearances manifest? For example, in space, if the sun shines in, then the entire spatial realm becomes bright. Then, when dense dark clouds gather, the entire spatial realm becomes dark. If the wind moves, if the wind blows, actually space alone will not move. But along with the wind, the emptiness of this space, and because the wind constantly moves in the air, during the process of this movement, space also follows the wind, and in relation to the wind, it experiences change and movement. It is probably spoken from this level. Then the sun reappears and the air is clear. Regarding this, for instance, after it has finished raining or snowing, the sky after the rain becomes quite clear and bright, a cloudless sky or very clear. That's what this means. Then water condenses. Regarding water condensing, the vapor rising from our ground gradually turns into clouds and mist. In the Tibetan translation, it is clouds and mist. If within space clouds and mist begin to swirl around, then space becomes dim and unclear. It takes on this kind of turbid appearance. Also, along with soil and dust, with the flying dust, this becomes a dust storm or smog within space. You see, in large cities like Chengdu, once you enter these places, it seems like smog permeates everywhere. Then water. If within space water becomes clear, then reflections and images can appear in the water, because space itself lacks any form or appearance. But space as well, sometimes in large lakes or in some ponds, the blue sky above can also be reflected. It can also be reflected within this space. Like in the past, Du Fu and Li Bai of the Tang Dynasty, they often wrote poems using the reflection of trees. Actually, space does not have a solid form, but it also frequently appears in clear water. From this perspective, space itself has no fundamental substance, but within space it can manifest relying on external causes and conditions. Actually, our mind, or the Tathagata Garbha, its fundamental nature is unmoving and unchanging. But relying on external conditions, indeed, our mind can also manifest things. External virtuous conditions cause us to generate a virtuous mind. External non-virtuous conditions cause us to generate a non-virtuous mind. Various external neutral causes and conditions cause our mind to also generate a neutral state. Also, various events occurring externally cause us to generate regret, distress, sorrow, and so on. There are all kinds. Then next he asks, what do you think? Do these various conditioned phenomena appearing in different circumstances come into being because of these conditions, or do they come into being from space? Next, the Buddha continues to ask, what do you think? There are all these appearances from different directions. Just now some came from soil and dust, some came from the sun, and some came from clouds and mist. From different directions and different phenomena, so many appearances arise. So, for all these appearances, do all these manifestations arise relying on their own causes, or do they exist and manifest within space? This is the same as the previous question. For example, if they arise relying on their own causes, just now the sun, clouds, wind, vapor, earth, water, there are about 7 of them. So, are they generated from within these phenomena, or do they all manifest within space? Are they generated within space? He asks like this. Suppose that these phenomena arise. If we say these phenomena, here these phenomena refers to all the 7 phenomena just mentioned, and that they are generated from their respective causes and conditions. For example, if sunlight is generated from the cause of the sun, if movement is generated from the wind, and as for clarity, if it is generated from the clarity just mentioned and so on. If they are generated from their respective causes, then the Buddha says, this is unreasonable. He proceeds to analyze it with Venerable Purna. Then, for example, when the sun is shining, does the brightness in the air come into being because the sun is shining? If so, then the sun should be everywhere in the 10 directions. Why do we see it as a distinct round object in the sky? He says, because when we analyze it here, there were 7 phenomena just now. Among the 7 phenomena, the sun is just used as a single point for analysis. The other 6 phenomena, including clouds, mist, and vapor, he didn't analyze all of these. Actually, if we were to analyze them, analyzing them using this method of reasoning is also entirely possible. First, let's speak from the perspective of the sun. At the time when the sun shines upon the entire earth, we all know that, as just mentioned, because there is the sun, there is brightness. And since there is brightness, as it was just said, because it is generated from the sun, brightness is generated from the sun. If it is generated from the sun, then when sunlight illuminates the earth, this sunlight, which is what is currently illuminating our earth, if so, the 10 directions of the world would all be the color of the sun. The entirety, wherever there is light, would have the color of the sun. The sun's light would be everywhere. For example, in our Larungar, no matter what time it is, as long as there is light, as long as there is light after waking up in the morning, when there is light, then there would be a sun in this place. Why? Because, as it was just said, this brightness is generated from the sun. It has nothing to do with space. The sun generates it. If the sun generates it, then wherever there is light, there would be a sun, because its cause is right there. In that case, the sun should be there. If the sun were truly there, then why do you say you can see a distinct round sun in the sky? You only see it in outer space. Oh, the sun is over there. You don't say that in absolutely all spaces. As long as the space can be seen, there is a sun. Why don't you say that? If brightness were truly generated from the sun, then why do you only point to that sun disk in the sky? Aside from that, why don't you admit, for instance, in our Dharma hall, usually the sun doesn't shine directly inside the Dharma hall, but in reality there is sunlight. Otherwise, when you haven't turned on the lights, you can still see inside the Dharma hall. In that case, inside this Dharma hall of yours, wherever light pervades, the sun should be present. Why? Because brightness is generated from the sun. Don't you admit that brightness is present now? If it is, and you admit its cause is the sun, then in that case, wherever there is brightness, the sun must be all-pervasive. But if you were to admit that, you wouldn't dare to admit it like that. The sun is only in the sky. Inside our classroom, if in every place with a little bit of brightness there were a sun, this probably couldn't be justified. So the first point is that saying it is generated from the sun, that is unreasonable. Extrapolating in this way, the others, including clouds and wind, the others can all be extrapolated one by one like this. Here the sun is just used as one, in modern terms, used as a pilot test, used as the focal point of this analogy for analysis. If, on the other hand, the brightness of the sky comes into being because of space, if it is not generated from the sun, and brightness is actually generated from space, then all of space would be shining of its own accord. Why is it not resplendent with light at midnight, or when there are clouds or fog? If you say such brightness is not generated from the sun, but should be generated from space, then if it were generated from space, space should be able to illuminate itself. As long as there is space, it would shine with brightness. If so, why do you speak of midnight? Midnight means the middle of the night, nighttime. And clouds and fog. So during midnight and with clouds and fog, when there are clouds and fog, why doesn't it produce brilliance? Because at that time space is still there. You see, space is there at night. But why? Given the reason that space is there, why do you say there is no brightness? Because when covered by clouds and fog, space is still there, although clouds and fog have already covered it, sometimes in the afternoon when there is thunder or dense dark clouds. But at that time, why don't we say there is already sunlight? Because at that time, space still exists. Didn't you say brightness is generated from space? If it is generated from space, why doesn't it produce resplendent light? If you say it does, you cannot admit that, look, at night without street lamps, without electric lights, there is simply no brightness. When dense dark clouds gather, at that time there isn't light like the sun shining down. There isn't such a thing. So if you were to admit it, it cannot be admitted. What is the conclusion below? It should be clear to you that the brightness in the sky is not due to the sun or to space, although the brightness cannot be present without both the sun and space. So we should know, what should we know? As mentioned above, the brightness manifesting in space is not generated relying on the sun disk. If it were generated relying on the sun disk, it would be generated by causes and conditions, but this cannot be admitted either, because as you said just now, being generated from the sun disk has so many faults, nor is it generated from space. If it were generated from space, then it would be generated without causes and conditions, generated naturally, but this is also unreasonable. So apart from these two, it cannot be present without both the sun and space. Apart from space and the sun, is there another way of generation? Actually, there isn't. A different way of generation. Apart from space and the sun, this is impossible to find here either. And it's not that such brightness is generated from the son of a barren woman, generated from turtle hair, or generated from other myriad things. This cannot be said either. The so-called law of dependent origination is just like this. This brightness of ours actually, when examined with reasoning, indeed cannot be established. If not examined with reasoning, in our conventional truth, it undeceptively manifests within our illusory appearances. This is called the emptiness of dependent origination. Everyone understands this as well. Next, we discuss true enlightenment, because at this point, actually, like Master Wu Yi and Master Yuan Ying, some of them take this passage from here. The same can be said of the true wondrous understanding, which is enlightenment, all the way down to nothing about reality can be established from them, and place this section here to explain. There are also some great masters. Down below there is a passage called, "You should realize that all these phenomena are fundamentally unreal," all the way down to, "Why then do you keep asking how they can exist together?" In between this, a portion of them move this passage forward, moving it in front of, "The same can be said of the true, wondrous understanding which is enlightenment." But it seems that from the perspective of the entire Tibetan text, the second explanation is followed, moving that lower passage to the front for analysis. The earlier part, "You should realize that all these phenomena are fundamentally unreal," all the way down to, "How then can you ask whether the primary elements will overcome each other in mutual annihilation?" Moving this section to the front and the rest below remains the same, but Yuan Ying and Wu Yi, some of them put this passage in the front, feeling that the logic flows more smoothly this way. It seems to us that the explanation is also quite similar to the previous style, because here we are analyzing where brightness is generated from. Having just concluded the analysis, it says this brightness is not born of causes and conditions, not born naturally, nor generated from anything else. Then what exactly is brightness? It then begins to analyze our alaya below, or discussing the true wondrous understanding which is enlightenment. The same can be said of the true wondrous understanding which is enlightenment, that is to say our inherent mind nature, our inherent bright nature of awareness. Actually, it is exactly the same as the analogy of space mentioned earlier. Space itself does not possess various appearances, nor does it reject various appearances, but relying on space, various appearances can also manifest. Actually, our mind is also like this. As for this mind of ours, it also does not reject various appearances. It itself is not the various appearances, but it can also manifest various appearances. Therefore, this mind of ours truly shares many similarities with space. Our true wondrous understanding, which is enlightenment, or true wondrous understanding. Now, this has been flipped back and forth. True wondrous understanding, true wondrous understanding, true luminous understanding. It has been shifted around and spoken of in many ways. Actually, it is just the bright nature of awareness. Our bright nature of awareness, the Tathagata Garbha, it is also the same. If one develops the category space in one's mind, then space will appear within enlightenment. Earth, water, fire, and wind each appear within enlightenment if one establishes each of them as categories. If that's the case, actually we also mentioned earlier, within the fundamental entity of our mind, indeed all manifestations are nothing. Didn't it say earlier, as long as there is karma, everything manifests? It is the same here. The Buddha tells Venerable Purna, if you have the understanding of space, this understanding of emptiness, then in front of you the manifestation of space can appear. Regarding the understanding of space, many commentaries in Han Buddhism also explain it using karmic force. Then in the Tibetan text it says, if you think of space, then with space, space can manifest before you. If you manifest water, earth, fire, or wind before you, they can also manifest. The meaning is, perhaps thinking is one aspect, but most importantly, you have this cause, you have this karmic force. If you have this cause and condition for space, space can manifest before you. What kind of space manifests? For example, sentient beings in the formless realm have the causes and conditions for space. Also for a mouse, it has the causes and conditions for space underground. For birds, they have the causes and conditions for space in the sky. So some have the causes and conditions for a small whole space, and some have the causes and conditions for a vast spatial realm. So as long as you have the causes and conditions for space, space manifests before you. Because as for the alaya, anything can manifest. If anything can manifest, we are the same. We might be towards this space, we partly have the causes and conditions for space and partly the causes and conditions for non-space. For instance, right now inside our Dharma hall, to have such a large space, we have such shared causes and conditions. In this way, it can manifest such an appearance of space. Earth, water, fire, and wind each appear within enlightenment if one establishes each of them as categories. By the same principle, us sentient beings, some have the causes and conditions for earth, some for water, some for wind, and some for fire. Thus, each has such causes and conditions. With such karmic conditions, then in front of each sentient being, it can manifest without any harm. Some commentaries state, for example, in the east there is the karma of earth. Then in the south there is the karma of water. A person in the west has the karma of fire, and in the north there is the karma of wind. Then these four people, having different causes and conditions of the four elements, can, in four places in the four directions of east, south, west, and north, manifest all four elements. I'm thinking, for instance, some of us now have the causes and conditions for fire. The weather is exceptionally hot. Some people have the causes and conditions for water, experiencing floods. Like in certain parts of India right now, and including Lanzo, aren't there floods in some specific areas? There are also situations like this. And in some places, fierce winds arise. I saw the other day in a certain place, cars were actually blown up into the air. Many people too. People were just blown up like a tornado. Some places have floods. Some places have fires. Some places have earthquakes. Some places have wind disasters. So disasters also manifest. manifest. The earth, water, fire, and wind that are not disasters also manifest. Therefore, whoever among us has such causes and conditions, they all manifest. Different karmas all manifest. Recently, on our side, the causes and conditions for fire seem to be a bit more prevalent. You see, many reservoirs in Sichuan are drying up, but it rained a little this morning, which made everyone very happy. I was wondering if it could rain in the afternoon as well. As a result, there was thunder but no rain. There was thunder all afternoon but still no rain. So our causes and conditions for fire probably haven't been fully exhausted yet. After a while, there might be causes and conditions for water. They say that later on it might rain continuously for nearly a month. If that's the case, our causes and conditions for water will be quite favorable. The realms of the four elements within the alaya of sentient beings can all exist. But whether it's individual sentient beings or collective karma, in the treatise on entering the Mahayana it is said, there is a kind of collective karma, a shared karma. With such karma, these various karmas of earth, water, fire and wind can manifest before us. Within this space, didn't we just say that if there is brightness, brightness can manifest? If there are clouds, darkness can manifest. So within our sentient world, once these causes and conditions are present, they can manifest. All of them appear interfused together in enlightenment if one establishes the category all. He says, if these earth, water, fire, and wind are all gathered together, and there are such karmic conditions, then earth, water, fire, and wind can all manifest completely. For example, regarding a single bowl of water for beings in the 6 realms, some see it as liquid, some see it as solid, some see it as mamaki, some see it as nectar, some see it as water, some see it as pus and blood, and some see it as other different entities, including water that quenches thirst and so on. Therefore, looking at this, if we sentient beings have such causes and conditions upon a single object, earth, water, fire and wind can all completely manifest. For example, regarding boiling water, actually, I think earth, water, fire and wind are all in it, because the water in my teacup has heat, which is the nature of fire. Because it is moist, it has the nature of water. It can move, which is the nature of wind. It doesn't scatter, which is the nature of the earth element. So you see, when I take a sip of water within my karmic force, this entity where the 4 elements converge can enter my body. In the past, when we were in normal school, there was a teacher named Dorje. In the mornings we were particularly cold, and our clothes weren't very good back then either. Every time, teacher Dorje would have a steaming teacup, teach us a little bit, and then he himself for us students back then, sometimes when we hadn't had breakfast, we were very envious even of him drinking water. Next, it's like this. Karmic force is truly, it's okay when karmic forces manifest separately. If the karmic forces, the earth, water, fire and wind, all gather and manifest together, that's also possible. How can they all appear together? Below it explains how they manifest together. Manifesting together might be a bit difficult to understand, right? If there isn't a solid entity, how can they manifest together? Below, the Buddha gives a very good analogy. Actually, I'm worried that I've forgotten it all now because I'm getting older. Often, right after explaining, I forget it all. Otherwise, when you are young, if you listen to this Shurangama Sutra and desperately memorize it, indeed many principles in it are useful for a lifetime. For Buddhism, including some principles in our tantric teachings, speaking of them here, might be very helpful for practice, verifying our daily practice. Plus, it dispels some doubts we normally have regarding Buddhism, especially regarding the understanding of our own minds, using reasoning for analysis. This is very important. Just now we said, if earth, water, fire and wind all gathered together, how can they manifest? The Buddha says this can manifest. Purna, it is like the sun's reflection in a body of water. When two people who are observing the reflection move apart, one to the east and one to the west, they will each see the sun's reflection moving along with them. He says, for example, if two of us see a sun reflection in a water vessel, the sun's reflection, then at this time when two people look, there is only one sun. For instance, in a large pot, there is water in the pot. When there is water, because the sun is shining in the sky, when two of us look over the pot, we actually see the sun disk. Then the two people immediately have to go their separate ways. One walks to the east and one walks to the west. At this time you take 2 cups. We can say you take a cup of water and he takes a cup of water. There might be another part later, but it's not analyzed here. Or you distribute all the water in the pot into the two people's cups, and there's none left in the pot. At that time, one walks east, one walks west. At this time, actually, if you look at it then, for the person walking east, the sun's reflection also follows you. And for the person walking west, the sun's reflection in his cup also follows you as you go. You each go east and west. The reflection moves east with the person moving east and west with the person moving west. In itself, the reflection has no fixed location. One person walks east and one person walks west. Then the sun's reflection in each person's water vessel actually does not have a certainty because it cannot be fixed. One walks east, one walks west. So at this time, do not quibble by asking how a single reflection can move in 2 separate directions. At this time, there's no need to raise difficulties, no need to debate saying, this is unreasonable. Just now there was one sun, how could it be that one ran to the east and one ran to the west? There's nothing to say about this. Just now, the manifested sun disk inherently had no fundamental entity. Then you say one ran over there and one ran to the west. There is nothing more to say about this. And do not ask how the 2 reflections appeared previously as one. If one goes east and one goes west, then the 2 suns' directions of east, south, west and north are all different. In that case, how could it be that at the very beginning we clearly saw only one? Is there such a debate? There is no debate. There is no debate about this. Such questions concern mere illusions, and nothing about reality can be established from them. Such questions concern mere illusions, he says here. If we observe it again, actually just now, whether it's one sun, 2 suns, or even more suns, they are all illusory, they are all unreal, they are all empty and elusive, manifesting but without inherent existence. There is nothing credible, no evidence, nothing reliable. It's just a deluded appearance manifesting before us. Apart from this, there is no manifestation. Actually, this means just now in the world, whether it's one or 2 or many, they do manifest before the deluded ones. Moreover, people also regard them as truly existing. Especially in Western society, its logic is very, there's a kind of accuracy, a standard nature. It insists that 1 is 1, 2 is 2, 3 is 3, black is black, white is white, whether from a legal perspective or from the perspective of the names and characteristics of things. This is a particularly fixed kind of word. Of course, within our false conventional truth, temporarily there are indeed fixed things. Water is water, fire is fire, wind is wind. We won't confuse these either. It's not that the Buddhist viewpoint doesn't even understand this, but in their true characteristics and actual entities, indeed some things are very illusory. For that sun's reflection in the water vessel just now, if one walks east and one walks west, then is the sun in here ultimately 1 or 2? If it's 1, then 2 is incorrect. If 2 is incorrect, is the one in the west fake, or is the one in the east fake? Or if the appearance of 2 suns is accurate, then the one that manifested earlier cannot be established, because 1 is 1, 2 is 2. If that's the case, why do 2 manifest? or countless ones manifest. From the perspective of logic, this is unreal. Perhaps some people say, oh, this is fake, this is a kind of illusion. Illusory things can exist, but real things cannot exist. Of course, for us sentient beings as well, 1 and 2 manifest before the deluded ones. When examined with the wisdom of the ultimate meaning, it is exactly the same as this phenomenon, without any difference. So this point is still very important. Next, he immediately follows up and answers Venerable Purna's previous question. Through such an analogy, he delves deeper into his previous answer. You should realize that all these phenomena are fundamentally unreal, and so one cannot specify anything about them. To assert anything about them would be as absurd as to expect illusory flowers in the sky to bear fruit. How then can you ask whether the primary elements will overcome each other in mutual annihilation? He says, when we observe the appearances of things, observe the characteristics of things, actually they are originally all illusory. Whether it is the appearances of earth, water, fire, and wind, just mentioned, or any appearance in the world, the appearances we see before our eyes are inherently illusory. They cannot be specified, they cannot be stated, they cannot be captured, they cannot be defined with a fixed word to assert them. What is it like? He says here it's like a person with cataracts praying for or expecting what? Flowers manifesting in the sky. Not only flowers manifesting in the sky, what else is he waiting for? Waiting for the flowers manifesting in the sky to bear fruit. When the fruits are abundant, I want to go enjoy them. Isn't this a very foolish statement? Originally there are no flowers in the sky, and then you still wait for them to blossom and bear fruit. Isn't that a very foolish statement? By the same principle, Purna, regarding the appearance you just asked about, the appearances of earth, water, fire, and wind, why don't the appearance of water and the appearance of fire overcome each other in mutual annihilation? Why don't they become the harmer and the harmed? Actually, it's just like this. When we observe within our true fundamental entity, actually its appearance can manifest in a certain sense, but just like flowers in the sky, or like the sun's reflection in the water, or like the moon's reflection in the water, or like an elephant in a dream, and so on. All these conventional appearances, you might think they overcome each other in mutual annihilation, but that's not necessarily the case. Just now, the two suns didn't harm each other at all. This is the perspective from the first aspect. You should realize that in their fundamental natures, the primary elements are a single reality, which is simply the wondrous awakened enlightenment if we observe its nature. Just now it was characteristics, then if we divide it by observing its nature. Just now I said if we split it. Anyway, we can just follow the original text to proceed, that's also fine. Although it's slightly different from the Tibetan version, the difference might be because he lectured from a different version. We can just follow what certain great masters have explained and proceed according to the original text, observing the fundamental nature of these phenomena, including the fundamental nature of the 7 elements of earth, water, fire, and wind. Actually, within this fundamental entity of the soul luminous Tathagata Garbha, the wondrous awakened mind, fundamentally the primary elements, water, fire, and the rest, do not exist at all. In its fundamental nature, water and fire, there is absolutely no such fundamental entity as water and fire, because the fundamental nature of the 7 elements is actually the Tathagata Garbha. Within the Tathagata Garbha, the entire distinction and division of earth, water, fire, and wind is absolutely impossible to exist. Therefore, why then do you keep asking how they can exist together? Then Purna, why did you ask earlier why water and fire do not overcome each other in mutual annihilation? Why don't earth and space accommodate each other? this kind of statement is also a foolish statement. So we usually have many questions. If we think carefully, they should be well answered here. We often encounter this. Since earth, water, fire, and wind are all of one taste and one entity within the Tathagatagarbha, how could they not contradict or conflict? How do they merge into one entity within the Tathagatagarbha? Whether it's the true fundamental nature of things or the characteristics of things, actually these are all like a dream or an illusion. Therefore, in Buddhism, when do you understand like a dream, like an illusion, the 8 analogies of illusion? At this time, you will have a new definitive understanding or a new recognition of all myriad phenomena. So some of us, after seemingly studying the treatise on entering the Mahayana, and after studying finding comfort and ease in the illusoriness of things, seem to naturally understand. Actually, any of these phenomena that we cling to so strongly turn out to be like pursuits in a dream. Apart from that, there is no substance. This lack of substance is not a dogmatic statement. This is what the Buddha said. This is what the Guru said. This is what the Vajra Acharya said. Whether it is correct or incorrect, we must listen to it. It's not like that. When we observe with our own wisdom within the true enlightened nature of the Tathagatagarbha, actually the appearances of all phenomena can be accommodated. And during the process of accommodating the appearances of all phenomena, they won't have the slightest contradiction. What is the reason for having no contradiction? It is related to the karma of sentient beings, and it is related to the fundamental entity of the things themselves. Also, our mind is like space. It is related to its nature, to its fundamental entity. But we pitiful, foolish, sentient beings, before being guided by a spiritual friend, simply did not understand such profound and rare principles. Exactly because of this, many great masters of the past often exclaimed using the word rare. The reason is right here. Otherwise, these great masters would also think, what is there to be rare about? You see, whether in Han Buddhism or Tibetan Buddhism, once one recognizes the original face of their own mind, they often feel, wow, so wondrous, wow, so beautiful. Why? Because clearly sentient beings and themselves have been together since beginningless time, but they never knew it, and we still additionally believe that there is some truly existing thing outside, constantly clinging to it. This is a very foolish, very laughable thing. Plus, when you truly recognize the fundamental nature of the mind, or the inherent nature of all phenomena, it seems a bit simple. At this very moment, why do many great masters of the past, whether male or female, whoever it is, after the pointing out of the pith instructions, instantly awaken? After instantly awakening, the state of mind is completely different from before. The reason is also right here. So here, actually, if it is combined with the direct pointing to the mind nature in tantric teachings, there might be a few more things that need to be said, especially if explained according to some viewpoints in the 7 treasuries. Some profound meanings within it can be further revealed clearly. It can also dispel many doubts and exaggerations, and then firm up one's own faith and definitive understanding, as well as the states one has realized, and so on. Next, the Buddha tells Venerable Purna, Purna, you consider form and emptiness as overcoming each other in mutual annihilation within the matrix of the Thus Come One. But within the matrix of the Thus Come One, space and the world of perceived objects are everywhere throughout the Dharma realm. This following section mainly discusses, just like the mind-only school speaks of the impure other-dependent nature or the contaminated nature of dependent origination. It discusses this. The Buddha tells Venerable Purna, you are actually taking these two phenomena of form and emptiness and making them overcome and annihilate each other, mutually becoming the harmer and the harmed, or one existing while the other perishes. In this way, within the fundamental nature of the Tathagatagarbha, it seems as if form and emptiness are completely like a white rope and a black rope twisted together and then forcibly imposed upon the Tathagatagarbha. Actually, Venerable Purna also might carry some habitual tendencies of the Shravaka realistic schools. So you are taking form and emptiness and forcibly imposing them upon that. Actually, many people, the other day, when we were in the nuns' cafe hosting some guests, among them were some relatively well-known individuals, and the questions they asked were also about how form is not different from emptiness, and emptiness is not different from form. They just kept, they were still just asking about these things. Perhaps they are also like this, forcibly imposing form and emptiness upon the Tathagatagarbha, but the matrix of the thus come one accords with form and emptiness. Actually, as the Tathagatagarbha accords with emptiness, emptiness is appearance, appearance is emptiness. With such an emptiness of dependent origination, it pervades the entire Dharma realm. These two are not contradictory, form and emptiness, because the fundamental entity of form is empty, and emptiness can manifest formed phenomena. So these two, according to what is taught in the Heart Sutra, are not contradictory at all. Movement associated with wind, the stillness associated with space, the brightness associated with the sun, and the darkness associated with clouds beings, however, suffocated by their confusion, turn their backs on enlightenment and embrace this world of perceived objects. Amidst the stress of being's entanglement with perceived objects, the world of conditioned phenomena appears. Therefore, appearing within such a Tathagatagarbha, whether it is the movement of the wind or the stillness of space, the brightness of the sun, the abiding of the clouds, as well as the deluded appearances of sentient beings, ultimately they turn their backs on their enlightened nature and unite with the external adventitious dust or the external six sensory objects, and thus generate various afflictions and stress. And then the myriad phenomena of the world manifest, the all-encompassing appearances of the world. The meaning is, because sentient beings do not understand the original face of the Tathagatagarbha due to this reason, under the circumstance of not recognizing it, just like in the external physical world, whether it is the blowing wind, the manifestation of space, the manifestation of brightness, the manifestation of darkness, including the delusions of sentient beings, and many of our 6 realms of samsara, the various manifestations of the physical and sentient worlds appear. Don't we say from the primordial ground, manifestations arise? When manifestations arise, sentient beings fail to recognize them. Failing to recognize them, ignorance appears. From ignorance comes the 12 links of dependent origination. Finally, the entire physical and sentient worlds, all the appearances of suffering arise. The reason is also like this. What the Buddha explains below is the pure dependent origination. The Buddha recognizes it. The eminent monks and great masters of the past recognize the original face of the mind. At this time, this whole string of deluded appearances mentioned above completely disappears, with my wondrous, luminous understanding that neither comes into being nor ceases to be. The Buddha, with the wondrously luminous Tathagatagarbha, or the state of the wondrously luminous enlightened nature, has completely comprehended it. In that case, it neither comes into being nor ceases to be. I am identical to the matrix of the thus come one. He is completely united and in accord with the Tathagatagarbha. The matrix of the thus come one is itself the wondrous, enlightened, luminous understanding which illuminates the entire Dharma realm. And such a Tathagatagarbha, it is exactly the brightness, it is exactly the Dharma realm. It perfectly illuminates the entire world, or clearly manifests within the entire Dharma realm. It actually pervades the entire Dharma realm. Because of this reason, within it, therefore, Within such a state, as just mentioned, if we fail to recognize the fundamental nature of the Tathagata Garbha, or that all phenomena can be accommodated and untangled, if we do not understand such a principle, we just drift within samsara. Actually, it is also like this in our human world. Many people who cannot perfectly integrate things, who cannot be accommodating, are still very miserable. No matter what happens, they become more and more attached, more and more obsessed, and particularly distressed, even when encountering the exact same situation. For example, your father died, and my father also died. But when death occurs, one person might think, oh, from the perspective of the conventional truth, all phenomena are impermanent. From the perspective of the ultimate truth, when I recognize the fundamental nature of my own mind, perhaps the suffering is gone. But as for another person, he recalls various past events and becomes extremely tormented. The more tormented he is, the more chaotic his mind stream becomes. So it is the same two events, but completely different. So, as just said, regarding our minds, ordinary beings grasp at things. After grasping, the entire manifestation of the 6 realms of samsara appears. The Buddha and the eminent monks and great masters of the past rely on such pith instructions to recognize samsara and recognize its fundamental nature. When you recognize its fundamental nature, anything can be accommodated. Therefore, past great masters often displayed various miraculous transformations and clairvoyance. The reason is all right here. He says, because the Tathagata Garbha, actually the Buddha and past great masters, including Manjushri Bodhisattva and Vajra Acharyas, they have truly recognized the original wondrous luminous awareness of the Tathagata Garbha. Its fundamental entity has already been recognized. In the state where they have recognized it, the one is infinitely many, and the infinitely many are one, because countless phenomena can be within one mind, and the mind can also radiate countless phenomena. Or using the words of the Avatamsaka Sutra, one is many, many is one. That is also fine. The great appears within the small, just as the small appears within the great. Mountains, rivers, and the earth can appear in a mirror, or Milarepa could sleep inside a yak horn. The yak horn did not become larger, and Milarepa's body did not become smaller. But this is very difficult for us ordinary people to comprehend. Actually, within the true fundamental nature of phenomena, the small can manifest the great, and the great can also manifest the small. I sit unmoving in this still place for awakening, and my Dharma body extends everywhere, the unmoving place for awakening. In the Tibetan text, it is called the unmoving Dharma realm. Place for awakening and Dharma realm are probably the same. This unmoving Dharma realm actually pervades the entire world in the 10 directions and encompasses the infinity of space in all 10 directions. Within the single body of the Dharmakaya, the space of the worlds in the 10 directions can also be contained within it. On the tip of a fine hair, magnificent Buddha lands appear. On a fraction of a percentage of the tip of a hair, actually, there is the phenomenon of manifesting countless Buddha lands. This can also manifest. Within a single mote of dust are lands as numerous as motes of dust, and in each land reside inconceivable Buddhas. Just as it is taught in the King of Aspiration prayers, within a single mote of dust there can also be countless Buddhas. Seated within each mote of dust, I turn the great wheel of the Dharma. One can sit within a single mote of dust, and for countless retinues in the vast and countless worlds extensively turn the wondrous wheel of the Dharma. This is also completely possible. Because I have freed myself from the world of perceived objects, I have become one with enlightenment, that is, having eliminated the habitual tendencies of all 6 sensory objects, then at this time your mind completely unites with the wondrously enlightened mind. The awareness mentioned in our tantric teachings can also be called the wondrously enlightened mind here. Actually, the mind of every single one of us right now can completely become friends with this awareness. But we probably need pith instructions. One is faith in the Guru and the three jewels, then maintaining a very pure state oneself, and also taking joy in introspectively observing one's own mind, accumulating merit and purifying obscurations and so on. When all such causes and conditions are complete, then yesterday you were an ordinary being and today you are a noble being. Transcending the ordinary and entering sagehood, it is possible. In the history of Buddhism, countless people have already attained such fruition of sagehood, so it should be possible now as well. Actually, everyone looks the same on the outside, but in fact, for some people, their minds are truly completely different from their previous state of mind. Even if today you have any suffering or afflictions, they won't find any vulnerability to exploit in you. Some people already have such a realization. Among the people we know, there are many as well. As just mentioned, if we truly recognize the original face of the Tathagata Garbha, then within that state, anything is possible. Didn't I just say, including nowadays in the secular world, those studying literature or those studying science, they are particularly meticulous about numbers and standardized formats. They are still very attached to them. We say, just as mentioned earlier, no matter what phenomenon it is, black and white must be distinct. Everything must be explained clearly. Wrong is wrong, right is right. Including when some people argue it's the same. Generally, there's no room for accommodation. You are wrong, and wrong is wrong. Whether you admit it or not, you must admit it. It must be exactly like this. There must be a very standard answer. But if we observe more and more in this way, ultimately, our true wrongs and rights, there's no way to even some of the conventional truths. So generally speaking, when we study Buddhist logic and Madhyamaka, conventional valid cognition is also temporarily established as a valid cognition, nothing more. It is not the ultimate valid cognition, because any conventional valid cognition can be completely refuted by ultimate valid cognition. Relying on these ultimate valid cognitions of Madhyamaka, and with this state of self-illuminating and self-knowing awareness, it is even more impossible to measure. Therefore, in the secular world, temporarily speaking, we still have laws, we have precepts, we have some secular restrictive standards. These should exist. It is not that we deny this. In the conventional truth, it's not that we don't acknowledge it. But when you reach a certain state, all secular things, including earth, water, fire, and wind, or the secular directions of east, south, west and north, or black, white, right and wrong, all of these actually cannot withstand any analysis. Therefore, regarding the behavior of some great accomplished practitioners, including any discrepancies in their external appearances before others, from the perspective of the profound ultimate meaning, he has reasons for saying so. Of course, for us ordinary beings, if we haven't reached this state ourselves, it is hard to accept. This is also understandable. Therefore, if we eliminate the dust and unite with the wondrously enlightened mind, therefore the suchness of reality manifests, the inherent nature that is wondrous, luminous, and awake. At that time, when you generate this genuine, what we call the non-dual luminous and empty self-illuminating and self-knowing awareness, or the completely unhindered naked state, the meaning is that these can naturally arise. We should stop here for today.
Chupun tsunen chua chua xiao
Bandaran gara badna atsadardam Bandaran gara badna atsadardam Bandaran gara banma atsadar do